Hello, we move on to the 10th module of the course in Applied Linguistics of the UGC program of E-Pathshala. This particular unit is devoted to something that we have already talked about, but talks about behaviorism and language teaching in some greater detail. You're already familiar with behaviorism, but what could be its possible impact on various aspects of language teaching, we'll try to see in this unit, and how behaviorist perspectives, which I tried to explain in an earlier unit, can influence various aspects of the pedagogical processes in the classroom. The first thing that we must appreciate is that at any point of time in history, the contemporary philosophical, psychological, and linguistic positions in theory will influence sometimes to some degree and sometimes to substantial degree the practice, the implementation. If you think about behaviorism and its relationship to language teaching, you will begin to appreciate that the dominant paradigms in linguistics and in philosophy and psychology. In philosophy and psychology, they were behaviorist largely, and in linguistics, it was a period of structural linguistics. All these had one thing in common, that we must restrict ourselves to the world of the perceptual, to the world of what we can see, what we can touch, what is around us, and not weave our mental webs. Largely speaking, there were of course exceptions of all kinds. So you know that we did talk about three major positions about language: the behaviorist, the cognitivist, and the innatist kind of position on language acquisition. If you think in terms of methods and materials and classroom processes, various assessment processes, they will always reflect during the behaviorist period, that means from the 19th century to the middle of the 20th century, and even today, our methods will be linear and additive, that learn small bit, then learn 2 bits, then learn 3 bits, and then keep putting bits together, and the building will be constructed. Okay, that is how. So you start from the sound, go to the sentences, and then go to the text. And we have been saying, as we said in the last unit, that it must be the other way around, and we'll try to keep that in mind. Now, the methods and the materials and the classroom processes which were located in behaviorism, there the whole idea was to break things into small pieces, like okay, this is for, let us say, present indefinite. So there will be many exercises for present indefinite, and this will be based only on this set of lexical items and no more. And there will be a lot of it was known as the methods are known as the PPMM method. Okay, PP meant MM meant mimicry and memorization, and PP meant pattern practice. So you take certain patterns and practice them a lot, and then you mimic and you memorize bits and pieces, and then you put them together and you will learn the whole language. This was the behaviorist kind of approach. And it impacted methods, materials, and all assessment processes, because they were also linear and additive in order. And we, in many of my workshops, I ask a question which often takes the participants by surprise, and I ask them, what do you think, Taj Mahal was built before it was built or after it was built? And it takes them only a moment's reflection to understand and appreciate the question and say that Taj Mahal must be conceived before it is built. Otherwise, it can never be built, or for that matter, anything. The idea of X must precede the execution of X. You can't start building, creating something without having that idea. But that's what the behaviorists believe. We have already talked in some detail about Pavlov and about Skinner, but the person who really turned our attention much before that, in the 16th century, to kind of very deep-seated behaviorist traditions was Francis Bacon. Now, Francis Bacon has a very famous book called Novum Organum, in which he set out to establish the fundamental methodologies of scientific inquiry. And he says, I am going to tell you how scientific inquiry must be conducted. And he was very unhappy with two sets of people. One who said everything is known, so there is nothing more to be known. Or the other set of people who said there is nothing to be known anyway. So why bother? Okay. So he said the cause of science will be damaged by these kind of approaches, and therefore he was very fond of the Greeks, and he said the Greeks found a middle path, and they pushed their understanding to a certain extent, and they tried to think very hard and draw their conclusions from the world of thinking and from perpetual working and exercise of the mind. And Bacon said, and this is on your screen, this slide will be on your screen, he said the evidence of the sense, so that's why I said, the very hardcore beginnings of behaviorism which we see even today in the 16th century, laid by Francis Bacon. The evidence of the sense I retain, but the mental operation which follows the act of sense for the most part, I reject. And instead of it, I open and lay out a new and certain path for the mind to proceed in, starting directly from the simple sensuous perception. So that is the foundation. So no mental operations, no idea before the object has to be there. So behaviorists did not even realize or did not even appreciate that between the object and the observation, there is always the observer in the middle. The observer is there and his mind is there. So the object will have to be filtered through my brain, through my information processing systems, my attitudes, my prejudices, and my biases. It's no getting away from that. And he, very insightfully, I think, Francis Bacon, I think very intelligent, he divided all scientific inquiry and all scientists into three categories. And he called them ants, bees, and spiders. So he said many scientists are like ants, they just collect a lot of data, but understand nothing. On the other hand, there are bees who get nectar but then produce honey. They are probably the best kind of scientists because they have reached at some kind of conclusion and which is worthwhile. But then the final category which he thought must be rejected is the category of spiders who just keep weaving nets. The mental operations, sort of abstract mental operations which he rejected completely. Bacon didn't like them. And then most importantly, Bacon, which I think is relevant for all scientists, even today. I think, and that should be kept, whether you believe in behaviorism or you don't, whether you are a cognitivist or not, whether you believe that human mind has certain cognitive skills or not, or whether there is a language faculty or not, irrespective of that, I think Bacon's warnings about what he called idols, what are the idols that can obstruct scientific inquiry, and he identified four kinds of phenomena which he called idols, which he said can obstruct human scientific inquiry. And he called them idols of the tribe, and idols of the cave, and idols of the marketplace, and idols of the theater. You will find all of them in the book called Novum Organum. Even if you type in Google Bacon's idols, you will get all this information. Idols of the tribe are there because of our just being human. We are made in a certain way. Our eyes are, it's quite possible, we would see everything as a square if our eyes were made differently. But our eyes are made in such a way that, this round retina and things cross like this, and that is how an image is formed. So image is formed in a particular way. We walk, I can raise my hand up to this, but no more beyond. These are limitations. But in terms of scientific inquiry, we may, for example, the whole tribe, the whole human tribe may believe that everything round is divine. Because, that time sun was considered to be divine, moon was divine, so moon was round. So everything which has a spherical, looks like a sphere, is sort of divine. Or whatever be, the human mind is sometimes prone to believe in certain things, and they can become obstruction in scientific inquiry. Then idols of the cave are the idols of the individual man. So we don't have just societal level or human level errors. We have errors at the individual level. So we have our own individual belief systems which may come in the way of I may like certain things, I may dislike certain things, and I keep them away. Let's say I'm working on stones, so I don't like certain kinds of stones, so they fall outside my spirit of inquiry. I may be working on language, I don't like a certain author, and I might say, let's keep his or her language out. And idols of the marketplace are formed by the interaction of people with each other. So they become, so there are also special meanings associated with certain words, and they become obstruction in the process of scientific inquiry. And idols of the theater, we like to display a lot, whatever little we know, and that becomes an obstruction. It is very difficult to say for people, even for the best of people, it's very difficult to say, I don't know. In India, for example, it's very difficult to find a person who will say, I don't know the route, or I don't know the house, or I don't know the path, please ask somebody else. People will find some way of, confusing you in some way or the other. They'll never say, I don't know. Same thing about knowledge. It's very difficult for people to learn to say that I don't know. I think that itself is probably the greatest indicator of knowledge. So these were the foundations of behaviorism, and behaviorism and language teaching with structural linguistics. That combination was sort of deadly in the sense that it said, take a stimulus, associate it with the response, then do a lot of practice, give reward or give punishment, and follow a method like PPMM till the time you get an automatic habit formation. And human learning, you see, the worst part of behaviorism and behaviorist experiments were that all animal learning was transferred to human learning. You know, it's so different. These are so different kinds of animals. We are also animals, but we are very different kinds of animals. That doesn't mean the other animals are in any way lesser animals than us. We are all animals. But in terms of having this size of human brain, and in terms of having language, and the kind of features that we discussed, you know, hierarchical structure of language and the duality of patterning in language, that human beings have, the various kinds of features of human language. But they extended Pavlov's dog experiment to human learning, and we saw that. And they, for example, see the experiments, another experiment conducted on the dog's body, that if the front paw, you know, like this, if the front paw was sort of, you know, some current was passed that place, it was stimulated, then there were 6 drops of saliva. Shoulder, there were 8 drops of saliva. Side shoulder, there were 7 drops. Back, at the back, there were only 3 drops, but on the hind paw, the back paw, there were 0 drops. I mean, this is not, I mean, you can't transfer this to human learning at all, but these things of this sort were transferred. So finally, we can conclude this module by saying that for the behaviorists and structuralists of those times, I mean, modern linguists are also structuralists, but in a different way. We will talk about that. But learning for behaviorists and language teachers of that time was a pure mechanical process of habit formation. And if you carefully look at language teaching even today, a lot of it is like this, habit formation, rather than constructivist in any sense. And it was believed that habits are strengthened by reinforcement, and language is behavior made of habit sequences, repetition, practice and reinforcement of units, linear and additive. I try to explain to you. Linear in one sequence and one being added to the other, which is not the cognitive perspective on language or on human knowledge at all. And that learning order, since it is linear and additive, the learning order of the student or of the child in the school will mirror the teaching order. That output will always be equal to input. Now, this is never the case in the construction of human knowledge, in the learning of language. In the first few cases in the early childhood, output is far less than input. Then suddenly there is a flowering of language and the output is far, far more than any input. It cannot be explained in terms of the input. So, please think about the limitations of behaviorism, and we will continue this discussion in the forthcoming modules. Thank you very much.